Sean is here from PEIP, another provider that has put in a bid in the new HITA process for bidding for health insurance. He has a presentation for you. He'll then conclude his presentation, open up for some questions and answers, and we will videotape this, so when your colleagues ask tomorrow, please let them know as soon as Gretchen and April can get it uploaded and going. We'll get it out to your colleagues as well. Thanks, Sean.
My name is Sean Byrne. I'm from Inova. We administer the Public Employees Insurance Program, PEIP as it's more easily called. What I'd like to do today is give you a quick background, the history of PEIP, how it was created, where things are handled in what departments, then talk about the PEIP school pool, which is the most important piece that I want to make sure everyone here understands today. And then lastly, we'll actually go through the plan designs to make sure that you understand how each of the options operates. So if you could take one and pass those out. While those are being passed out, I can give you a little bit of the history. The PEIP program was actually created by the legislature back about 25 years ago. So PEIP is a true public plan. It's administered at the state of Minnesota. It's nice because the fact that it is a true state plan, completely transparent, there's no profit motive. It's handled at St. Paul, what used to be the Department of Employee Relations, now the Management and Budget Division. They're the folks that manage PEIP. They're also the people that manage the State Employee Health Plan, which has 120,000 members. And that's important because PEIP is able to leverage or piggyback off the state plan. All of the contracts for administration, networks, negotiated discounts, PEIP gets to piggyback off those state contracts. So we have very, very low administrative rates, which means with every dollar that's paid in premium, there is more money available to pay claims because of the great bargaining power that the state grants through us. But when we set rates, that's where we separate from the state. Our rates are based on the actual groups that we're looking at. And I'll explain the rating process in general. When the legislation came out that created PEIP 25 years ago, there was one very unique clause in that legislation, and that said that there's two ways basically to enter the PEIP program. The first way would be similar to what's happened recently. The district puts out an RFP, we respond, and the district decides this is what we want to do. Everybody would transition to the PEIP program. That's the way most districts have handled transitions in insurance through the years. But the PEIP legislation also created a second way to change insurance, and that gives bargaining units a unilateral right to make a decision. As long as they give proper notification to the district, a bargaining unit can elect to participate in the PEIP program whether or not the district decides to go along. From PEIP's perspective, we obviously would rather have everybody come in. That's the simpler and easier way for transitions like that to be handled. But there are some times when there are different points of view, so that option is available under the legislation that created the PEIP program. The handout that I have, I've got three handouts. I'll give them to you in phases. First handout, the front side with all of the verbiage, that's kind of the sales piece that actually talks about the success of the program. And really the most important topic that it's going to talk about here is the school pool that we created back about 7 years ago. At that time, 7 years ago, the Education Minnesota had put in a bill to do a mandatory statewide school pool. It had passed the House and it had passed the Senate, but it ended up being vetoed by Governor Pawlenty. At that time, the people that managed PEIP talked with some of the folks at Education Minnesota and said, we've got an idea for a new way to handle insurance. And even though we can't give you the mandatory statewide school pool, we can create a voluntary pool. The PEIP program is already statewide, but the more important piece is that there's also a new Advantage program. If any of you can remember back about 13 years ago when the state went on strike, It was really a strike that was driven by benefit issues. The state used to have a benefit plan that was just the absolute Cadillac plan. 0 copays, 0 contribution, just a fantastic plan, but financially it was tanking. And that led to a lot of very difficult negotiations. Short strike ensued, but the net result was very positive. The state went out and created their own benefit program, a plan they call Advantage. So the state moved to this Advantage program back about 13 years ago, and they have been having great success with it. So about 7 years ago, the same folks that manage PEIP said, well, PEIP right now has 53 different plan designs, because in the past, whenever an RFP came out, we needed to duplicate benefits usually. So we had created plan design after plan design over the years, which is great for choice, but it's horrible for trying to control your costs. So they decided we're gonna toss away these 53 different plan designs, and going forward, we're only gonna offer the Advantage plan. So we duplicated the state's Advantage plan, we called that our high plan, and then we added 2 additional options. And that is what I'll talk to you in a little while, is the PEIP Advantage program going forward. So we said to Education Minnesota, we think this is a great idea for a voluntary school pool. We'll talk to as many schools as we can and try and get them to come together and be rated jointly. And that's kind of the key piece, to be rated on a joint basis. There are existing, pools, co-op pools and things like that that are already existing throughout the state. But with our Advantage program and the way that we're going to pool claims, PEIP is very, very unique and different from those other pools that exist. So we started that 7 years ago. The first groups that came in, the first year there were 14 schools, and it was a wide variety. Some large school districts, the whole Duluth School District came in. Some very small groups like Tri-County, which has about 30 or 34 employees. Some in the north, some in the east. They were all over the place. So it was a wide variety of groups that came in. And that's always the toughest position. The first groups to come in, there's no history to look at. They're actually just kind of, stepping out and deciding that we're going to take a chance and try to try to jump into the pool with us. So those 14 schools came on. Since then, the pool has now grown to, I think it's at 70 schools today, and that's combinations of either a school district or bargaining units from a particular school. But it's grown to 70 schools, roughly about 19,000 members. And again, we add that cloud along with the state's 120,000 members, and when it comes time for purchasing, administrative contracts, things of that type, PEIP is able to really drive some excellent bargains in the marketplace. So the pool has been created, and this will be kind of the key point. If you can remember what I say now, I think this is probably the most important piece for you to think about. The school pool is a true pool. Once you come into the pool, your total future renewals are going to be based solely on the claims of the whole pool, all 70 schools combined. And the big advantage there is you're not going to see those wide swings up and down of your rates based on claim differences. And I know out here in the western part of the state, that's had even larger circumstances where there have been some very, very large renewals that have come out. But I did look back. We quoted your group back in 2013, so not that long ago, 2 years ago. And I believe the decision was made that you had lower prices from your current plan and you decided to stay with that plan. The reason I want to point it out is because of the pool, had you actually come into the pool at that time, the rates that you'd be seeing today instead of the rates that are part of the PEIP quote that we turned in, those rates would be 10% lower. That's about $112,000, I think is what I calculated, because our pool has been doing so well that even if you had paid a little bit more for that initial year, the fact of the pooling over the long term, that really would pay dividends. And we've seen this in many, many cases where a group hasn't come in. White Bear Lake is a great example. We quoted them back 4 years ago, and PEIP put our rates on the table, and the rates were very attractive. The carrier, in-force carrier, had already put their proposal in, or their renewal, and their renewal was calling for like a 12 or 13% increase. When the PEIP rates came out, the carrier changed their rates and dropped them to a negative 13. So that's almost a 25% drop in rates based on, competition, which is basically part of the reason the whole kiddo laws were created too. But the folks at White Bear thought this is great. They were high-fiving, thinking we just got our rates dropped 25%. That is an absolute win-win situation. Well, since that time, of course, they didn't come into the pool, so now we quoted them for January 1, 2015, and I showed them what the rates for the tier that they would have come in at. They were in the B tier, which is actually what we would have quoted for you guys too. And I showed them what those rates were today versus what we were quoting them for 2015. It was $2.3 million lower. So sometimes there's initial savings from a current carrier or a different plan out there, but the fact that PEIP is going to take your experience and pool it with 70 other schools, and we have had fantastic experience with our pool, means that as a long-term solution, I think the PEIP option is, for a group of your size, and absolutely the way to go. With roughly 100 members or 100 employees or so, your claims experience is going to be very volatile. There's no way around that. And if the plan you're on right now is going to give you renewals based on your experience, that makes bargaining very difficult because you don't know whether you're going to be looking at a 3% rate increase or a 25% rate increase. That it is going to go up and down with your claims experience. On the other side, there's the way PEIP does things. We've got the back side of that first sheet. When your plan isn't well known, it's always great to talk about actual experience. So this is the total history of the PEIP pool and the renewals we've had. It shows that it looks like there's two pools, July and January. It's actually one pool, but some groups have a January renewal date, some have a July renewal date. So that's the only difference. We always pool the whole claims of the total pool when we come up with renewals, but half the pool renews at a different date. So as I mentioned, we started the program back in 2009. The first renewal came in 2010. Duluth, the largest group that had come in at that time, they had only been in the program for 6 months, so we had no real creditable claims experience at that point. So when it came time for renewal, the underwriter said, even though the state plan has been running at about an average 4% increase, they said, we don't take any chances, so we're going to give a trend increase of 8% because we don't have any claims experience to look at. Kind of disappointing. We were hoping to see something closer to that 4, but I understand the logic. Because we are a state plan, we do not play any rate games. So they said, this is what we have to go with. July of 2011, now we have a year plus of claims experience to look at and base our renewal. The program is doing great. So we came out and said, we're going to drop rates 6.6%. When you drop rates a pretty good chunk like that, the next year there's usually kind of a whiplash effect, and usually you'll get a little bit of a bigger increase because of that. Well, when it came time for the renewal in July of 2012, plan is still doing great. So we dropped our rates another 3.3%. So over that 2-year period, we've dropped rates 10% basically. July of 2013, that looks like a little higher bump, but actually that is the first year when the Affordable Care Act taxes were included in. So about 2.5% of that 6% increase was just the Affordable Care Act taxes. So the actual renewal itself was about 3.5%. Not too bad, not as good as the other years. July 2014, we're right back on track now, 1.9% increase. We just released the July 2015 renewals just about 1 week ago. Again, the plan is doing great. The increase came out at 2%. On the January pool, the same thing happened. The first year we looked at the January group and their claims. We didn't have true claims experience, so we had to use more of a trend increase the first year. Ever since that point, we've had actual experience, and the renewal was 0.5%. It's not the way it's actually shown, but it was 0.5%, 2014, and for 2015 it was a 2.4% renewal. So when you look at those 9 renewals, our track record, our average renewal increase is 1.8%. And there's no program out there that can touch that. When you talk about just rates, sometimes that doesn't tell the full picture. I did a presentation and somebody from another plan came on after me and said, you know, our rates really haven't changed much more than what PEIP is showing. He said, we went back and looked at our 9-year history, and our premium price change over that period, I'd use his exact words, came out at about 3.5% to 4% per year. The one piece he didn't mention was when they had started back 9 years ago, they had a $200 deductible plan. Now they have a $2,400 deductible plan. So when you take, you know, the 4% increase in premiums, that's not counting the 34% value drop that the benefits took. So to just say it was a 4% change isn't really very factual. So we did have some plan changes in 2015, so I wanted to make sure we put all of our cards on the table. When you put the plan value change, which is about 2 to 3%, along with our renewals, our average value and premium change over the 9 renewals has been right at 2%, which again is a figure that nobody out there can touch for an extended time frame like that. So the biggest reason you should be considering PEIP as a solution for you is that it's a long-term solution. Pooling together, having those claims divided out by roughly 20,000 members takes away that roller coaster ride that you're going to be on when you're rated solely on your claims experience as a group of 100. You know, there may be years where you have great experience, you get that 0% increase. The next year you might be looking at a 15 or 20% rate increase. The PEIP pool, which on the front side with all the verbiage, just to go through this very quickly, it's actually a little outdated. We're up to 70 schools and almost 20,000 members. The plan is a self-funded trust. The state operates it. Being self-funded means, again, we're squeezing the fat out of the program, that we have great administrative rates. The amount of overhead that you're going to pay under this plan is lower than any plan I've seen out there, which means there's more of your premium dollars available to pay claims, which means you'll see better renewals. PEIP provides some very, very unique options as far as choice, and that's what I'll talk about next. But the first thing is to decide, do you want to be in pool? Because if you've already decided, you know, we're the healthiest group out there, we know things are going to be good and we're going to have some very, very good claims, we don't need anyone else, we just want to ride on our experience, PEIP isn't a vehicle for you if you believe that. But unfortunately, even if your staff today is very, very healthy, all it takes is, you know, a premature baby here, a heart condition over there, and suddenly you're not a very healthy group anymore. You know, with only 100 employees, your claims experience is just too small to be creditable, so it's going to be very volatile. PEIP lets you spread that claims experience out with a much larger base of groups. Pass this out. This is the actual plan designs. When you look at the piece that has a staple with the 3 black bars across, that's actually the piece that we use for open enrollment meetings. The front page is just a very nice primer. Did everyone get one? Front page is a very nice primer that just kind of explains how things go in general. Will we show it?
Yes.
Okay. So when you look at the sheet with the 3 black bars across, the front page is a primer that just explains the choices for members. Behind that are the 3 plan options. So the first option is just called Advantage Health Plan, 2015-16. That's what I call the high plan. That's a duplication of what state of Minnesota employees get. So if you know anybody that's a state of Minnesota employee, that is their benefit plan right there. We added 2 additional options. The next one is the value option. That's kind of the middle option. And the last option is our HSA compatible plan. And you have an HSA here currently, don't you? Okay, so good, you understand the basics of HSAs. So that's it, basically a high, medium, and a low. But when you look at that information, especially after a long day of spring teaching, I'm sure that that can get your eyes to glaze over very, very quickly because there's a lot of information here. But really, you're going to make 3 choices. So if you can follow with me just for a few minutes to understand the options, all of this will make sense and hopefully it'll be very clear to you. If you look back at the verbiage pages, up on top it talks about step 1. Step 1 says that at every open enrollment, each employee decides, do I want the high plan, the value option, or the low plan, which is the HSA option. Doesn't matter what anyone else in the district does, I'm going to decide, do I want high, medium, or low. If I take family coverage, my whole family will go with me in whichever choice I make. So that's choice 1, happens at every open enrollment, and it locks you in until the next open enrollment. Choice 2 doesn't show up on any of the benefit sheets. Choice 2 says the next choice each employee makes is they're going to select which network of providers they want to work with. And the choice is Blue Cross, Health Partners, or Preferred One. Nice feature, of course, since you guys have probably had Blue Cross forever. If you like Blue Cross and you think they do a great job, you can stay with them. If you've heard good things about Health Partners or Preferred One and you want to try something different, of course you could choose them. The choice of the network does not affect the premium cost. So you're going to get rates for the high plan, the medium plan, and the low plan. Which network you choose does not change the premium cost. It also does not change the benefits, with one exception. For some reason, under our plan, Health Partners does pay a better benefit for treatment of infertility. Other than that, the benefits are the same across the board. So, except for cases of infertility, doesn't matter which network I choose for the cost or the benefit level. But it does matter for that network of providers that I want to make use of. So basically, you're going to pick which network of providers would you and your family make use of under the program. So again, if you're happy with Blue Cross and you know their network, that can become an easy choice. Otherwise, at every open enrollment, you could also look at options from Health Partners or from Preferred One. So choice 2, again, at every open enrollment, pick the network that you want to work with, and you're going to be locked in until the next open enrollment.
You pick that yourself, you don't have to, she and I don't have to pick the same
Nope,
one.
it's an individual choice. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. I pick, do I want high, medium, or low? Then I pick the network. The third choice is where the program becomes more unique. If you talk to anybody that's going to talk against the PEIP program, this is the piece they're going to say, this is why this plan is evil. The third choice says that every member of your family that's covered is going to select a primary care clinic. So this is a primary care clinic driven program. It's not an HMO from 30 years ago, but it does say that all of your planned or routine care does need to funnel through the primary care clinic that that member is selected, or wherever that primary care clinic would refer you out to. When the state created this plan back 13 years ago, they actually won 2 national awards, but they looked at how people access care. And it was 93 or 95% of the people, they had a doctor or a clinic that they went to. If that doctor or clinic found something serious, they were referred to a specialist. Basically the way that this program works. Anytime it's an urgent care situation or an emergency, you can go anywhere, of course, because you don't have the time to worry about what networks or anything like that. When it's urgent care or emergencies, you go and get care as fast as you can. But for routine or planned care, you need to go through the primary care clinic. And that's very important to this program because one of the ways that we have saved a lot of costs is the tiering of cost levels. There was an article in the Minneapolis paper back about 60 days ago now, and it showed the cost of a procedure from a wide variety of the metro area and outstate practitioners. So they look at a tonsillectomy and say, what did all of these various people charge to perform that procedure? The difference or the variance was 306%. So you can think your plan design is doing great and you're controlling costs right now, but if you're not putting any financial pressure on the providers to control their costs, you're just passing through claims that are going to be paid with your premium dollars. That is why PEIP, the plan design, is so innovative that it went to this tiering of cost levels, which I'll explain in a minute. The tiering is done by, once a year, the state goes out and talks to every primary care clinic in the state, gets their prices for all procedures, and also gathers quality data. And it's only on primary care clinics. Another point, if you can try to remember, you're only picking a primary care clinic. Every member of your family could have a different clinic, but each member has to pick a clinic. Primary care clinics are broken down into cost levels. The state, when they gather all that cost data, they say, based on all of the data we collected, you clinic A, you're going to be in cost level 2. We mention it because there's a clinic 7 miles down the road that's in cost level 1. And we're going to incent the employees with lower deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-pockets to use a more efficient provider, cost level 1 being the most efficient providers. They give each of the providers a second look and say, we just told you that you might lose some of your patients going down 7 miles to the other clinic. We're going to give you a second look. If you're willing to pull down your charge level to get into that cost level 1, you wouldn't lose those people. So there's a managed competition fight internally to make sure that the clinics keep their charges as low as possible. Some clinics have done that. They dropped their cost level. Members didn't need to change. That's a win-win situation because those members now get lower deductibles and co-pays. The plan will see lower claim charges, so we'll have better renewals. Other clinics say, we don't care. Our prices are right where they should be, and that's fine. We just give them that option under the program. So every primary care clinic has a cost level, and that is what locks you into your benefit level. If I choose, and that's why I handed out the other sheet that actually shows, I just pulled out some of the local areas and what the providers and the cost levels are there. But say I go into Detroit Lakes and I go to Sanford. I'm going to be in cost level 2, so that second column, I'm going to lock in, that's my benefit level. If my wife happens to go to Ascension in Detroit Lakes, they're a cost level 1. She would be in that first column. She would have lower deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-pockets than I would. So she would have a little bit of a better benefit program because she has chosen a more efficient provider. Again, we both can choose wherever we want. And when you lock into that provider, I wanted you to remember, you're only picking a primary care clinic. You're not picking hospitals, chiropractors, surgeons. You're just picking that primary care clinic. So if I choose Essentia and I'm in cost level 1, they send me down to the Mayo Clinic or they send me over to the University of Minnesota, I stay in cost level 1 because that is based solely on my choice of a primary care clinic. So that's a very important piece to remember, that you're only picking the primary care clinic. That locks you into one of the 4 cost levels. Wherever they refer you, you stay in that cost level of your primary care clinic. It is a primary care clinic-driven system, so first thing other people will say is, you are giving up the right to go anywhere, anytime, any provider. That's true under PEIP. You're agreeing that I will send all of my routine or planned care through the primary care clinic that member's chosen, which really is your normal pathway anyway, so it's usually not a very big change. Wherever they refer you, you stay in that cost level. If there ever came a point where, say you had back problems and you wanted to be referred to specialist A, and your clinic said, well, no, we always refer to specialist B for this because of our track record and everything else with them, and and you couldn't come to an agreement with them, you always have sort of the last say in that you can change your primary care clinic. Those first two choices you were locked into until the next open enrollment. The choice of the primary care clinic, you can actually change during the year. It doesn't happen very often that people actually change because of referral patterns, but it is there to make sure that you still have that control or say over what would happen with your health care. When I enrolled Duluth, was there for two reasons. That was one of the most interesting groups that we've had. First off, they had had an average increase prior to coming into the program of 15.8%. I went and did the presentation to their insurance committee, which is a large group. It was about 25 people. And it was one of the coldest presentations that I ever went through. I didn't know why at first, and then it dawned on me. They used to have a plan, if any of you have ever been up in the range, called the J plan. It's just the Cadillac. Cadillac isn't the right word, but it's the Cadillac of benefit plans. Prescription drug copays are 50 cents, for a 90-day supply, things like that. It's just a fantastic plan, but it costs an arm and a leg because it's such a rich benefit level. So when I talked even about the PEIP high plan, that was still a step down from what they had, and they really weren't interested in giving away benefits until luckily one of the field reps from Education Minnesota, Gary, met with the district and said, here's the difference in premium. What we can do is set up an HRA versus an HSA, and we can go to the plan design that has a $1,900 out-of-pocket maximum for single, $3,800 out-of-pocket maximum for families. And we'll create an HRA for every single and family member of that out-of-pocket maximum amount. So we can guarantee every member will not pay a dime for care for this year. And the district will save $1.5 million. I mean, that doesn't happen very often, but that's an absolute win-win situation because they thought a little bit out of the box. My favorite renewal meetings each year seem to be Duluth because they've had fantastic renewals under the program. When we gave them those rates, their carrier came in with a rate that was like 15.2% of an increase. The Duluth Insurance Committee slid the PEIP bid over to them, and they said, we need to look and see if perhaps there's more recent claims experience. Let us get back to you in a couple days. Sure enough, they came back a couple days later, and their rate was almost down to the PEIP rate. The Duluth Insurance Committee said, that's not the way that we want to do business. We want to do things on a transparent fashion, give us the best rate right up front. Because if you can just pull your rate down 10%, that means one of two things. Either you were giving us a very bad deal in the past and you had built up enough reserves that you had enough fat that you could just say, well, sure, we'll drop your rates 10%. Or they're deciding we don't want to lose this group, so we're going to take our reserves that are necessary and we're going to spend those down and buy down the rate, which could work out if you have a great year as far as claims. But if you have a bad year in claims, basically now you've double dipped and you're looking at an enormous renewal increase. And they said, either way, we don't want to do business that way. So they came in and that carrier complained to the state how PEIP doesn't know what it's doing as far as underwriting, even though we use the largest actuary underwriting firm in the country, blah, 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 saying it was just a horrible idea. Duluth is still paying less now than the renewal that carrier delivered to them 7 years ago. So when we have our renewal meetings, the year that we dropped rates 6.6%, they had a $1.5 million deficit. I think it was 300 teachers and others were on the chopping block. When we delivered our renewal of an 8% for them, an 8% decrease, 2/3 of those people were back on the payroll just because of that. So the renewal meetings at Duluth are something in the insurance world that usually doesn't happen very often. They're very, very happy and fun. But the reason I actually started that long story is to tell you, when I did the Duluth meetings, everyone there was talking about the Mayo Clinic. And I started getting a little nervous, saying maybe that carrier was right. If everybody in Duluth is going down to Rochester for care, we're going to see some enormous claims. Well, it was more of a nervous security reaction that people are doing. In fact, the head of St. Mary's Duluth Clinic, which is a huge, very, very well-known clinic, he came in and talked to the staff and said, we work hand in hand with the Mayo Clinic, but only on cases that need to be referred to the Mayo. You know, if you're coming down with the broken leg, you don't need to be driving down to Rochester. It doesn't make sense. So they explained how they work with Mayo, and Mayo really doesn't want people from far away driving in without a referral, because now they have to start all of the testing over from scratch. I mean, ideally, Mayo wants to take very, very high-level cases so they can use their expertise, but that's almost always on a referral basis, which is basically the way that this program works. So that third choice, you pick the primary care clinic. If you look at the first page of benefits, which is the high plan.
One question before you move on. Did you say that the primary care clinic can be different for each family member? Did I get that correct?
Yes, each member of the family picks their own primary care clinic. They can be different clinics and they can be in different cost levels too. So again, if I chose an Essentia clinic, I'm in cost level 1. My wife chooses a Sanford clinic, she's in cost level 2. The only time that there's mixture is letter B, the family deductible maximum, where it shows 75/150. 150 is the family deductible max. Under cost level 2, it's 180 and 360. So if there's that mixture within your family, I would have a $75 deductible, my wife would have a $180 deductible, but our family deductible maximum would default to cost level 2, the higher of the two. So our family deductible cap would be $360. But again, I still have a lower deductible of $75 because I've chosen a clinic that's in cost level 1. Does everybody follow me on that part? Okay. I'm going to run through the benefits quickly just to make sure you understand how things flow and how everything works, and then I'll just throw it open to any questions that you guys have. Okay, again, using the scenario, I'm in cost level 1. I look up on top across the board, letter A, preventive care is covered at 100%. Again, going through that primary care clinic that a member has selected. If you drop down to letter M as in Mary, all prescription drugs under the program are handled through Navitus, N-A-V-I-T-U-S. It's on the front page. Navitus is the PBM or Pharmacy Benefit Manager. They've got a huge network of all of the major chains, and the vast majority of the in-town pharmacies are part of their network. Navitus breaks prescription drugs and their formulary into either tier 1, 2, or 3. Tier 1 is going to be generics and some very, very common name brand drugs. Tier 2 is going to be the majority of name brand drugs. Tier 3 is going to be some of the more expensive name brand drugs. So I would either pay a $12, $18, or a $38 copay for a 30-day supply of whatever was prescribed. Those $12, $18, and $38 copays, if they would ever accumulate in a calendar year to letter N, that is my prescription drug out-of-pocket maximum for a calendar year, which is $800 for an individual, $1,600 for family. So it takes a lot of $18 prescription copays to ever hit $800 in a year, but it is possible, and that's there as a protection for you. So there's no deductible, but those copays accumulate to the out-of-pocket maximum. Most of the other boxes within the matrix, it'll say deductible does apply. So the letter B is the first dollar deductible. And one thing I should point out, another very important fact. Since your renewal is on a July 1 basis, if you guys would elect to come into the program, we will give you credit for any deductible and out-of-pocket expense you've incurred in 2015 towards the PEIP deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. So there's no penalty for you switching halfway through a year. So just make sure you understand everyone doesn't get the raw deal because you're starting over with your deductibles and out-of-pockets on July 1 with PEIP. We'll go back in the prior 6 months and give you credit for everything from your current provider, everything under the group plan that you're currently under. So I'm in cost level 1. If I go in for an office visit, I've got a $75 deductible. So the first $75 of expenses comes out of my pocket. Once I've paid that, now my deductible is done for the calendar year. So if I did that on July 1st and I go back for another office visit, On August 1st, I look at letter C, my deductible's done, so I will pay $18 for that copay. That's it. My wife, if she had gone in for an appointment, she's responsible for the first $180, then her deductible's done, and now for the rest of the calendar year, she would pay $23 for an office visit. If in August I tear up my knee, I have to go in for arthroscopic surgery, bill comes out at about $10,000. I look at an outpatient surgery copay. Of that $10,000 bill, I would pay $60. The rest is covered by insurance. If my wife did it, she would pay $120. This is the high plan. This is a very rich benefit level. Say in November, I'm in the hospital for a week and the bill is $100,000. I look at an inpatient hospital copay. Of that $100,000 bill, I'd be responsible for $100. My wife would have been responsible for $200. That deductible of letter B plus any of these copays, except prescription drugs, they accumulate to the out-of-pocket maximum, which is $1,100 for an individual, $2,200 for family. So the pecking order is deductible first. Once that's done, now I'm paying copays. Once the deductible plus copays would accumulate to the out-of-pocket maximum, then I'm covered at 100% for the remainder of the calendar year. Some people look at out-of-pocket maximums and say, I can just judge plans by the out-of-pocket maximum, how much I have to pay in monthly premium plus what the out-of-pocket maximum is. It's not a very good way to do it, because under our plan, roughly 3 to 5% of people would ever reach the out-of-pocket maximum. Because it's such a good benefit level, it's very hard to get to that $1,100 in out-of-pocket. So the first thing you should always be looking at is the deductible, because that's the piece that everybody deals with up front. Under the Affordable Care Act, plans had to create a value as to basically how much of the expected average claims in a year they would pay. It's something you should look at with your current plans, because you're never going to be able to compare apples to apples right across, but you can look at the value of one plan versus another and then look at the prices. Under the PEIP side, our high plan is a 93% value. The value option, which I'll talk about next, is an 86% value, and the HSA option is a 78%. And there are many plans out there that have lower values and have lower premiums because of that, have very high deductibles. So far from the PEIP side, we've decided not to do that. I mean, we have an HSA plan, but we haven't gone to these $5,000 and $6,000 deductible plans. The thought process has been kind of simply that it becomes a pretty crummy benefit level with very little benefit actually given to people when you get to that high of a deductible. Some people think it is a way to go, and obviously that's their choice. But from our view, the benefit is so low, and you're going to pay so much before you get any benefit that it sometimes just takes away, the impression of benefit at all. So we basically just have the 3 benefit options that we offer. Yes.
I've never done the copay thing, so I don't know. What does it mean as annual deductible applies?
Okay, in the box, if it says annual deductible applies, again, that's the pecking order. That means I've got to satisfy my deductible, which was letter B. So in my case, the first $75 for any of the categories where it says deductible applies, I have to pay the first $75. Once I've paid $75 once, now the deductible's gone for the year. Now for the rest of the year, I just pay co-pays or co-insurance. Co-pays and co-insurance are basically the same thing, except a co-pay is a specified dollar amount, like $18 for an office visit, whereas co-insurance, if you look at an MRI, letter K, that says you'd be responsible for 5%. So if I have an MRI that costs $1,000, it means I have to pay $50, 5% of that. It accumulates, whether it's a co-pay or co-insurance, it accumulates with the deductibles to reach that out-of-pocket maximum. So that is the high plan. If you turn to the next page, is the value option. In the value option, everything works the same way, but now the premium's lower because the deductibles The out-of-pocket maximums and the co-pays are higher. So you're gonna take more of the risk, so we'll drop the premium. So this is for somebody that says, my family's pretty healthy, we don't need that real rich benefit because, we just don't use the plan that much. But I do want a very good benefit plan so I can sleep well at night. The value option will fit the bill there. What was a $75 deductible for cost level 1 is now $400. So I'm taking more risk. The prescription drug out-of-pocket maximum that was $800, letter N, is now $1,000. The medical out-of-pocket maximum that was $1,100 is now $2,000. So you pay less in monthly premium, but you take on more risk as far as the portion that you would pay for claims. Basically, how much insurance do you want to purchase? The third option is the HSA option. Under the HSA plan, there's a few things that are done a little differently just because of the IRS rules regarding an HSA. The first is when you look down at letter M, you'll notice for prescriptions now under the HSA plan, it says deductible applies. The other two plans, there's no deductible for prescription drugs, but by law, there is a deductible under the HSA plan. So under the HSA plan, there's no separate co-pays or separate out-of-pocket maximums for prescriptions and medical. Everything is just lumped together. Preventive care up on top is the only thing that is paid without a deductible. The deductibles are much higher because the premium is much lower. So again, one of those people that says, I haven't been to a doctor in 5 years, I hate paying that monthly premium, I want a plan that's just going to give me that catastrophic coverage. This is our HSA that would cover that. This is still a pretty good benefit level. It's not one of the very, very, bronze level low plan. So it is an HSA, obviously qualifies for an HSA program. The district would decide whatever HSA administrator you guys want to use. PEIP doesn't care. We're giving you a plan design that meets the IRS rules. You can pick whomever you choose to be the administrator of your HSA programs. One thing I do want to point out, letter B, when you look at deductibles, this box is split in half. The top half is for people that take single coverage. So if I take single coverage and I go to a cost level 1 clinic, I have a $1,500 deductible. Once I've paid $1,501, now I'm just paying co-pays or co-insurance until my out-of-pocket maximum would be reached, which is $4,000. And again, it's still pretty hard to reach $4,000 out of pocket when the benefit level is as high as it is under this plan. My wife, she'd have a $2,000 deductible. Her out-of-pocket maximum for single is the same, $4,000 for an individual. If we took family coverage, that was if my wife took it as a single person. If we took family coverage, again, each of us would have our own deductible, but the family out-of-pocket maximum is a bulk $8,000. There's no $4,000 cap on each one. It's just a flat $8,000 per family member. And there also is an embedded deductible. It's easier to explain. Say everybody went to cost level 2 in our family. It used to be that there'd just be a $4,000 family deductible, but we tried to make it a little easier. If there's one member in the family that gets very sick, once they hit $3,200 of expenses, they jump into benefits and just pay co-pays. The rest of the family still had $800 worth of deductible to satisfy. So we do have that embedded deductible on the HSA side, but the out-of-pocket maximum is just a flat or bulk $8,000 for family. So the choice of primary care clinics locks you into a cost level. If you have sons or daughters that go away to school, because you could switch primary care clinics, so your son goes up to UMD, you'd switch from the Sanford Clinic to St. Mary's Duluth Clinic in September simply by calling the number on your ID card, saying, my son is going up to school, I want to switch to St. Mary's in Duluth. They would do it over the phone. As long as you call by the 15th of the month, the change is effective on the next 1st of the month. When they come back in May, you can switch them back to the local clinic by, again, just calling. So it's very easy to do that. If while your son was up at UMD, they're in a car accident or they have some urgent care situation, emergencies, urgent care are always paid right as if it was going through the primary care clinic locally. If you have a son or daughter that goes down to Iowa for school, our network doesn't run quite that far to Iowa City. So at that point, when you look at any of the boxes, you'll see the fine print paragraph that says, basically, we give an additional level of benefits for people that have an out-of-state residence, either early retirees down in Arizona or Florida or whatever, or students living out of state. Basically, it's a deductible 70-30 plan, 70% benefit, 30% co-insurance from the member, up to the out-of-pocket maximum of whichever plan you pay. So just a couple last points. The program, the Advantage Plan, has been around for 13 years. It seems a little bit new to you, and it always makes people a little bit nervous, but the state employees have been on this plan for 13 years. There are no gaping holes or problems. Sometimes people say, if you go into the PEIP plan, you'll never see the Mayo Clinic again. I've got 140,000 members that can say that's not true. But it is a very emotional choice. I did some meetings with one large school district, and there was a lot of confusion that went on, unfortunately, because not many people showed up for the meetings, which is kind of a common problem. But there was a teacher who had had a serious eye operation the year before. So she got the benefit sheet, she pulled out the primary care clinic listing, and she looked at it. Her surgeon wasn't on this list. She sent an email to everyone in the district and said, how can you look at this program? This is junk. If we had had this program a year ago, I would have had to pay $80,000 out of my pocket for my surgery. She went on an absolute rant. The unfortunate part is, because she hadn't gone to the meeting, this is a list of primary care clinics. It doesn't have surgeons. Her primary care clinic was a cost level 2, so her deductible would have actually been $50 lower than the deductible she paid. The surgeon was a referred surgeon by her primary care clinic. She would have paid less under the PEIP program than she did on her plan. But because people always get very nervous when you talk about switching health insurance, she reacted, and unfortunately she reacted kind of badly from the PEIP side of things. But just so you know, you're not alone in it, making that choice. In this area, we brought a lot of schools into the program over the last 4 or 5 years. Detroit Lakes, the teachers groups are in. Fergus, the teachers came in. Fergus Falls, now the whole rest of Fergus has come in. Wadena, Pine River, Perham just came in last July. Ulen, Walker, Cass Lake. So there's a lot of schools up in this area that have come into the program. No program is perfect, but we work very hard to make sure that that transition does work out well for people. The company that I work for, we've provided all of the marketing, the customer service, and all of the billing and administration for this program for day one, for 25 years. So we understand the program, and when the Edina teachers voted a second time to stay in the program, they actually said their #1 reason, beyond the fact that they just had half of 1% for a renewal increase, they said their #1 reason was the customer service level was so good in the program that they felt very, very comfortable. That they thought they got better service under this plan than they did under their old regular health insurance plan. So with good renewals, the pooling of claims, they thought that this was a great place to be. And we've got large groups, we've got small groups. I think Ulen is actually, could be our smallest group in the pool right now. Or we've got the ASIO bargaining units, which are about 5,000 members. So if you think that you'd be better off being part of a pool and not seeing those rates going up and down on an annual basis, I think the PEIP program would be an excellent solution for you. Throw it open to any questions you guys might have. Yes?
How many schools have entered the PEIP program that have dropped out?
That's a great question, because there's an unbelievable amount of misinformation that gets out about this. 70 groups are in the program. 2 schools have left. 2, not the dozens, as one of the competitors said at one point, but 2 schools have left. One was not too far down the road, Lake Park Audubon. They came in 6, 7 years ago. They were in for 2 years. They got a bid from, I think, the co-op that was 2% under us, and they decided to go back out after 2 years. And then there was one of the Red Lake, the clinic in town had been changing enough that it made people uncomfortable with the change in the cost level, so they decided to leave. Those are the only 2 groups that have left, and that amounted to, I think, about 95 employees out of the 20,000 members we have. So our record for keeping people under the program and how happy those groups are is very, very good.
Is there a price list on how much these things cost?
I didn't put out the prices because I didn't know where you were in the process of, when bids are opened up and when they're, shared with the public. So I did not share rates. I'm sure, that information's available. I'm not sure
Yes.
how you're putting that out.
Yes, it is public. FEA has that information, so,
I got a copy of it.
yeah.
Maybe if you can share that, then that would help. And again, one thing I'll mention, of the 70 groups in PEIP, I'd say almost half, if you could do a true apples-to-apples comparison with in-force plan, which is very difficult to do, almost half the groups came into PEIP paying a little bit more. They just bought into the philosophy that it doesn't matter if we're a few % higher this year. The fact of being in a pool that's doing so well over the long term pays back in spades, what amount you may have paid in that initial year. Yes?
Sean, the first 2 plans, you talk about out-of-pocket maximums, but to give, if we're both into drugs and medical help, we have to combine those out-of-pockets.
Yes.
So it's 800 plus 1,100 for a total of 19 if you're single.
The out-of-pocket maximums under the high and the value plan are separate. Actually, sometimes that's helpful to people. If you're somebody that's got just a condition that's being treated with drugs, you've got that $800 protection, so you hit an out-of-pocket more quickly than having a combined out-of-pocket. But you're right, the absolute worst scenario would be to add the 2 together. But again, that's 3 to 5% of people in a year may actually come to that because the value of the benefits is so good. In the old days where you had deductible 80-20 plans, if you had a large hospitalization and you're paying 20% of the cost, you crank up to the out-of-pocket maximum very, very quickly. Under this plan, you may be paying $100 out of pocket for that hospitalization that could have been $1 million. So the benefit level is so much more rich. That's why I say the out-of-pocket, it is something to look at, but it should be way down the list. What you should be looking at is, of course, is the premiums, and then you should be looking at deductibles.
And then one more question.
Sure.
What I'm seeing on this list, and I don't really see many here, but you almost need to plan to pick your health plan network and then your clinic, because they don't always go into the same tier. Is
That's a
that
good point,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Way back when, it was more common that, the clinic that you're choosing would be at the same cost level in 3 different networks. Like if you look at Sanford in Detroit, it's a cost level 2 under all 3 networks. Lately, there has been a little bit more of that competition within networks where, let's pick which one that showed that. Most of those that I just pulled in this area, it is the same under all 3 networks, but there's some times where one network will cut a special deal with a clinic and say it'll be a 2 under Blue Cross, but under the other 2 carriers, it could be a cost level 3.
Yeah.
So you're right that you need to look at both of them. I said it in an order, but basically you do need to make sure that the best cost level for your clinic, you look at the network that's applicable with that. Usually it's going to be the same under all 3, but once in a while there is a difference in the benefits. And one of the most common questions I get is, well, if Sanford is a cost level 2 under all of them, how do I pick my network? What does it matter? Blue Cross Health Partners preferred one. And it is a personal choice, But the thing I tell you is, look at all referral providers, or look at what chiropractors you use, eye care providers, just make sure they're a part of the network that you use. If you're using Blue Cross now and you know that all of your providers are in that network, that makes it a relatively easy choice. One thing that I didn't highlight under the step sheet, step 3, the third paragraph down, I mentioned that this is an easier plan than HMOs from years gone by. I told you that all routine care, planned care has to go through the primary care clinic and wherever they referred you out. There's actually more flexibility than that. Basically, there's categories of OBGYN, mental health, chemical dependency, eye exam for the annual vision exam, and what am I missing? Chiropractic. Those 5, you don't have to go through your primary care clinic. You can use any of the self-referral providers. It's a list that each one of the networks has. So, if my wife decided that she doesn't like the OBGYN at Sanford, she can call the number on her card and say, I want to look at other OBGYNs because I want to go somewhere else. She would still stay at the cost level of Sanford, but she could self-refer and go to any